To our session today. I think that you've all been sitting in on our first panel and hearing the views that we have been receiving. Obviously, we have heard concerns about the amount of data involved in bulk retention, about the costs implied for businesses, about meeting the goals, the stated goals of the bill, and about the implications for encryption. Professor Jackson, Professor Ormond has said that the bill might not be perfect. You're never going to get a perfect bill. Do you have some recommendations for perfecting it?
Just to go back on again the discussion we've had, I would be concerned about the amounts of data that were being required to be stored. Okay, we're talking about this being empirical or whatever, and yes, the data can be stored. The cost that is put on to people eventually, either through taxes or actually as they pay for their broadband, might be prohibitive. As the commercial colleague said, it might actually prevent us from exploiting the advantages of broadband. I am also concerned, as the commercial colleagues were, that there is contained within the bill a possibility that companies who offer end-to-end encryption would be prevented at certain times from providing that facility to their customers. I just stated that. I mean, it's not just a dispute between the experts. If you look at the proceedings of another select committee, the one that dealt with the bulk collection of data by GCHQ, they identified three types of data. One which was clearly metadata, one which was clearly content, and a grey area. That is not reflected in the bill as it stands. But in presenting this bill, the Home Secretary stated that the data that was going to be made available would be the equivalent of an itemised phone bill. I do not think that actually this data that we're talking about is the equivalent of an itemised phone bill. It is significantly more. It has significantly more information content in it than an itemised phone bill gave.
Professor Jackson, would you want to?
It's my view of the bill is that it's doing something which is a blanket approach, taking everybody's data for possibly very little gain. That there will only be a very small percentage of that data that becomes useful. It possibly is in the way that the bill is phrased at the moment, although I perceive it as a reduction of privacy. It's not a big enough reduction to make a big change. So it's in some ways edging us down a route which goes to less personal privacy without giving us a whole load of gain. That there will, as we just said, because of the technical aspects of it, there are ways of subverting what the bill is doing, which those who are liable to be involved in the terrorist activities, who are liable to be the people committing crime, will certainly make use of, and will be aware, because there is now a bill, that they should be making use of it. So that the gain is not going to be very great, but the cost, and as we've talked about in terms of all this data that's got to be stored, will be quite high. And also this erosion of privacy which we've begun will effectively be the first part of a descent into maybe an eventual solution where, okay, we do get a situation where we're more able to clamp down on terrorism, but we've thrown away a huge amount of privacy rights.
Professor Jackson.
Okay, so the evidence I would have for this is the report of the committee that looked at GCHQ's bulk data collection, and it was clear that there is a collection of bulk data, but if we accept the evidence that was taken by that committee, we have to say that only a very small percentage of that data is actually looked and examined, and I think we have to do that. But partly the reason given for that, if you read the report, is that there is, as of yet, not the technical capability. Although we are making inroads into big data research and processing huge amounts of data. There is, as of yet, not the technical capability in GCHQ, and this was given as evidence, that whole set of information can be processed. Now, clearly, we've been talking about technological evolution, and it is a major research area at the moment to be able to process data automatically and make conclusions and find out information from the processing of huge amounts of data. In some ways, the supermarkets are already ahead of us with their reward cards, etc. And in the future, the very fact that data has been collected may open it up to mass surveillance in new ways. And again, there are some safeguards within the bill about that, and they will help for going through to that mass surveillance. There is more safeguards than the previously we had, but it is, one has to say, it is more possible to make use of that data looking forward than is happening at the moment or has happened in the past.
It's not
Professor Jackson.
just process. I'm sorry, that is wrong.
Professor Jackson.
I think you were asking the question about the bulk data collection.
I'm partly asking why it wasn't part of the bill. Why has it already come into force?
But I think it is. The answer is it is covered in the bill, but it is legal because it has been legal from, and I'm not a legal expert on this one. There's an earlier telecommunications bill which made it legal for GCHQ to collect bulk data, and this was confirmed by the RUSI panel that Professor Ullman sat on. I'm obviously the concern that I would have is that this is part of the weakness of the bill, that there may be overseas countries who are willing to collaborate. There will certainly be overseas countries that do not collaborate, and therefore what that will do is push people who are seeking to subvert what the bill is trying to do to use overseas providers as a way of making sure that they're able to carry out whatever terrorist activities they wish to carry out without being identified by our own security services.
So this goes on to what was discussed earlier by Professor Anderson about treaties being so important that if we develop this bill here, then we're going to have treaties with countries overseas to work with them and get some kind of consistent approach.
Which may turn out to be difficult, as we've seen in the US. The direction of travel may be in an opposite direction from the way the UK government is going with this bill. And it is generally seen as this bill is rather more stringent or whatever than any other government seems to wish to pursue, and in that case we may be putting ourselves in a position where we are unable to collaborate with other governments because we have produced a bill which has stricter requirements than other governments have. Well, just to say, I do feel that encryption is vital for commerce to happen on the internet.
Yes,
and there is, there's a theoretical debate that it could all fall apart in one scientific discovery. If that happens, we would have a serious problem with the economy.
Thank you very much. I think, unsurprisingly, that was one of the more heated panels we've had before committee so far. I would just say in closing that I don't think there's anyone on this committee or in this House who is losing sight of the purpose of this bill, that it is there in order to provide law enforcement and intelligence agencies with the powers that they need in order to fight crime in a digital age. But I think that the concerns that we've heard today about proportionality and clarity do need to be properly scrutinised. I also think that there are questions about ensuring that the bill does deliver its intended aims without weakening encryption or exposing large volumes of personal data to security risks, and it is right that that should be properly scrutinised in this committee and in others in the House. I'd like to thank you for the help that you've given us today. If we do have further questions, we will follow up. I hope that you will be happy to help us in our endeavour to translate the technology into plain English for colleagues. Thank you very much. Order, order. That brings this session to a close.
Room. Portcullis House, the Wilson